Today, I'm gonna go through another real life case study of a couple who reached out after watching this channel and they want to know how much they can expect to spend if they both retired early at the age of 57. And they had saved well with around $2.7 million, but they wanted to know if they could have a comfortable retirement if they decided to retire early. But they also wanted to make sure that if they retired, they were able to go accomplish a lot of things that they had really been pushing off because of work, like travel and home improvements. So what I'm going to do in this video is walk through the options and levers that we pulled for them to help them see what an early retirement would look like if we add in some additional costs of the things they've been putting off. I think what you'll be surprised to learn is that a few small but important tweaks made a big difference in their ability to spend more than they thought they could in retirement. So make sure you stick around to the end as we show them what they could expect to spend. Okay, so let's meet John and Jen, both age 57, and these are not their real names, of course, but I want to start here is looking at their balance sheet. That way you can see their overall financial picture, and I'm using round and general numbers here for privacy, of course. But if we break things down by account type, they have cash of around $100,000. They also have a brokerage account that's around $800,000. They also have two 401ks that amount to about $1.4 million here. And John also has an IRA with around $400,000. And lastly, their home residence here is around $1.5 million in total. That it also has a $180,000 mortgage still on the house. So if we're just looking at assets they expect to spend in retirement, that puts them right about $2.7 million in total investment assets and cash. All right, next, as far as retirement income goes, their future Social Security is expected to be around $42,000 for John and $40,000 for Jen at full retirement age. So both of their incomes are going to be dependent basically just on the portfolio as well as Social Security income. All right, next, let's talk about their expenses. In order to retire, they would need to be able to cover all their core living expenses, which is around $8,000 a month. Just as the baseline. On top of that, we also want to factor in other variable expenses that are ultimately going to go away in retirement. For example, they have a mortgage of around $2,700 per month that will go away in about 12 years, as well as a private health insurance here that we're accounting for about $2,000 per month for them until their COBRA expires. That's when it's going to start. So that puts them at about $12,700 or so worth of average expenses that need to be covered in the initial years of retirement and before they reach Medicare age. All right, so we went through the details of their balance sheet, their income, their expenses. Now let's put it all together and look at some long-term linear projections of what their financial picture looks like if they were to retire early. Now here is John and Jen's financial plan and what it looks like visually when we run the numbers. Now, as you can see here that each one of these bars is a year of their lives, as well as each bar represents their total investment portfolio over time. So next year, they're gonna be age 58 and their investable assets at around $2.9 million here. Again, this is essentially a linear simulation of their portfolio value over the rest of their lives, accounting for things like taxes, inflation, investment returns, their expenses, and longevity. But there are a few assumptions that we use for this projection. And number one is going to be we're running this until age 95. Of course, you might be saying to yourself, that's ridiculous. I don't think I'm going to live that long. But again, for the purposes of this plan, they have more longevity in their family. And also a few other assumptions that we're using here. We're assuming an inflation rate of around 3.75% because they wanted to be more conservative. And then lastly, we're also using an investment rate of return that is growing at an assumed rate of 6.5% per year on average starting when they retire. But looking at their picture here, I mean, overall the trend was that they were on track to have a very comfortable early retirement. They could cover their core living expenses, the mortgage, and also health insurance pretty comfortably here. But after going through this process, we knew we wanted to take this one step further, because once they knew that their core living expenses were covered, they wanted to see what was possible if we started spending more money on the things they've been putting off, like traveling the world, and also finally some home improvements that they never got the chance to do. So the first thing we did after getting the base iteration of their plan together, we decided to test two different simulations. Number one, they wanted to travel abroad more than they had ever possibly dreamed of, especially after COVID. They wanted to hit their bucket list of world travel. So they wanted to see what it would look like if they spent around $30,000 additional dollars per year adjusted for inflation on travel essentially throughout their retirement. And also, if in about 2 years they decide to spend around $100,000 or so on some home renovations. And you can see here when I toggle these two on, they're plan doesn't really look quite as good, obviously because they're spending a lot more. So looking at this visual, that gray value that you're seeing here is essentially showing the loss of portfolio value and the impact it has on their assets. And it shows that their assets last to around age 92. So looking at their assets, this level of spending didn't quite give them a level 10 confidence, but clearly traveling this much for the rest of their lives wasn't quite as realistic. It was more of a test, but we went back to the drawing board and they said, yeah, probably doesn't really make sense to travel that much in your 80s or 90s. So we made some adjustments to essentially show, how about we just test being able to travel this much until age 80? So I'll switch this over and we can see their plan here definitely looks a lot better after adjusting that much spending. At this point, they were projected to have around $1.4 million in portfolio assets at the end of life at age 95, as you can see on my screen here, which again is an adjusted for inflation number. That would be like having around $342,000 in today's dollars. And for them, the reason having a portfolio left over at the end of their lives was important. It's because neither of them had long-term care insurance. And they wanted to make sure that if either of them needed care, that they wouldn't become really a burden on their family. They also were okay with using their home equity as sort of a last resort to pay for those expenses if needed. Now, I should mention that in all these projections, we are assuming an annual rate of return of about 6.5%. Of course, you're never going to earn that rate every single year. That's completely unrealistic. But over the long term, it might average 6.5%. But of course, year to year, it could be dramatically different. The important thing to know is that projecting these numbers out are an important trend for your retirement, but they're not here for precision, especially if you're within, striking distance of retirement. And the reason that life isn't linear and it also isn't a spreadsheet. So you want to make sure you have a dynamic plan on top of this that adjusts with life as it inevitably changes. And you've probably heard the term Monte Carlo analysis, and that's just exactly what you're seeing on my screen right here. And what this is doing is running thousands of different simulations, testing out this plan to say, for example, you have a 74% or a 90% of chance of success. So naturally you ask yourself, what does that even mean? Does that mean you have a 26% chance or a 10% chance of failing and running out of money? Of course, in real life, you wouldn't spend your portfolio at that same level if you saw you were on the path to running out of money, but that's what a static linear projection or even a Monte Carlo analysis that spits out a percentage chance of success or failure is essentially telling you. So how can we make this better? And I think that when the rubber meets the road, we want to take a more realistic and dynamic approach to the way you spend money on a more periodic basis while you're in actual retirement. So if we assume all the same factors as before with the initial simulation where we retire at age 57, we also go through the additional travel until age 80, as well as the home renovation, let's now take it a step further and go through what the research says you can realistically spend on a monthly basis from the portfolio. As you can see, with a proper allocation, the right amount of diversification, we can expect to take roughly $15,000 from the portfolio with their plan each month. Now, if you're quick with math, you may notice this is a significant chunk of the portfolio, about 6.5% to be exact, and you may be thinking, surely there must be something wrong here. This is way more than the 4% rule that I've heard about. Again, the problem is that the 4% rule fails to account for things like other cash flows and also the ability to be dynamic and change your income. So instead of being rigid and burying your head in the sand and saying, I will always take 4% regardless of what's happening in the market, you're instead flexible and willing to adjust your income slightly. By doing so, this is going to unlock the ability of not missing out on all that potential income if the market does well, and also not sticking your head in the sand and running out of money. Again, here's the key, and I don't want to understate this. A flexible withdrawal plan only works if you're willing to adjust your income when, not if, markets decline. And that is exactly what this green and red chart is showing right here. The second thing that must be followed when implementing a retirement income plan like this is lowering portfolio withdrawals once other income sources kick in, like Social Security. For example, if we look at their income source projections, and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so we can get rid of that spike from the home improvement, we can see that once their private medical drops off, they stop traveling as much in their 80s, we decrease portfolio withdrawals by an equal amount each time. When Social Security kicks in, we also lower portfolio withdrawals, so their total income stays the same, but now there is less pressure on the portfolio. Now, their income plan looks really good. And there are a lot of enhancements that we made here, but I want to show you one last simple strategy that's projected to save them over $1.4 million in their lifetime tax bill. So if we look at their initial tax projections, we see that taxes are projected to be very low in those early retirement years. And they sort of ramp up as you age. And that's really because of two main reasons. Number one, if we follow a traditional rule of thumb and we say, let's take income from the taxable accounts first, the IRA, and then finally the tax-free Roth accounts, we end up with a situation where there's little tax generated early on, which can feel like a good thing early in retirement, but over 70% in this situation of their assets are in tax deferred accounts. And the IRS is not so patiently waiting to take 30 to 40% of that account in taxes because of required minimum distributions later on in life. And number two, because they're retiring at age 57, they're gonna have a period of time before Social Security kicks in, a time when they have basically no income really coming in, so we could be strategic in how they recognize income. This is also known as the retirement tax valley, and it's a golden opportunity if you do the planning right. So if we do some proactive tax planning each year, we essentially convert their deferred accounts up to the 22% tax bracket. We smoothen out their taxes. As you can see, there's more taxes paid up earlier. And by doing so, it lessens their lifetime tax bill and their future tax liability from required minimum distributions, and they're able to take advantage of that tax valley. So if we compare their previous plan to their tax optimized plan, we see that their lifetime total taxes are projected to decrease by roughly $1.4 million. And of course, with less taxes paid, that means more money in their pocket. So I hope this was helpful for you as you think about your own early retirement, especially looking at different strategies like the one we covered today. So let me know if you want to see more of these case studies, and feel free to share this video with someone else that wants to retire early. But thank you guys for watching. I will catch you guys on the next one.